Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Unido ISO Innovation Laboratories. This session is co-organized with the International Organization for Standardization as part of the working session of the ISO Technical Committee 279 on Innovation Management, Working Group 1 and Working Group 3, which Unido is hosting this week at the Vienna International Center. And its sister session to the Unido is ISO Innovation Seminar, which took place on Monday, last 27th of June. Unido is a strong advocate for the use of standards to enhance prosperity and the well-being of people, as well as to safeguard the environment. In light of this, today's session will focus on promoting digital transformation, innovation ecosystem, and standards for inclusive, gender-responsive, and sustainable industrial development. Specifically, this session will explore the potential of increasing the participation of vulnerable groups in innovation activities, including through digital transformation, as well as the relationship between several standards such as innovation management, sustainability, and quality. With that said, I would like to thank you for joining us, both in person and virtually. I now have the pleasure of inviting our Managing Director of Unido Directorate of Digitalization, Technology and Agribusiness, Mr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, to deliver some opening statements. Bernardo, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I will not make it so formal. We are among friends. So nice to meet you again, Jose, Leo, Arachi, Johannes, Cindy, so many friends. I'm not naming everybody, but very happy to be together and very happy that we managed to bring the committee here. Thank you, Leo. It was your request, it was your idea, and we made it. And Alejandro worked a lot to make it happen. Not only the session here, the session Monday, finalizing the document. There was a lot of work and good spirit. Thank you so much. I don't need to repeat. We have with ISO a long collaboration. I have been part of the ISO family, mainly with some specific committees, 176, and then 214 with the environment, and especially I have lived through the whole process on social responsibility. It was not my turn to be part of 279, but Raymond Tavares accompanied a bit the process, and we engaged with you, Johannes, and Alejandro is bringing this forward. And we have been indeed for a long time been collaborating with ISO, but COVID brought us together again because we started a series of the role of standards in during the lockdown, in the disruption of the value chain, in the disruption of trade, in all what happened during these processes. And Unido has been working on standardization in many areas. First of all, Unido was instrumental since 40 years to establish many standardization bodies in developing countries. And this was at the beginning our main role. We engaged also in international standardization activities directly and sustainable development. To name some older committees where we engaged, TC34 on food products. I think we contributed mostly with the leather. Yeah, Unido was really leading the expertise on TC120. From the numbers, you can see that these committees were quite early committees on and footwear also, wood and wood-based. But those days are long gone. We have engaged, as I mentioned, a lot after Rio with the sustainable dimension of it. Unido created the case to have a new work item on energy management system, and we still are very proud, and is still part and backbone of a number of projects we do in Unido. So it was also good business because we have many projects that are built on the work of 50,001, and we do everything. So we did the pre-standardization, as well as we have been doing the implementation of the standards. We help certification. We engaged also with conformity assessment. It was not easy to change the way. At the time, we have only auditors that were coming from quality, but were not linked to the energy sector. So we have a long history on that. And we have been involved in all stages. And as I say, we try to play a role in advocacy, but also in forging the partnerships. And these are the good opportunities to do that. I know that you have been also very much engaging with us. Today, we want to talk more about digital transformation. And here also we can claim that Unido has been a thought leader. We started very early making the relation with the digital transformation, what is going on, and linking digital standards, digital transformation with people, planet, for prosperity, with the SDGs, and making this relationship in order to bring new business models. So digital technologies that are environmentally compatible and increase resource and energy consumption, and worsening damage to terrestrial marine ecosystem and accelerating climate change. So we have been not only promoting and advocating of the role of standards in economic development, but we have been the ones to say, yes, but standards play a very important role in relation to the environment, in relation to social inclusion, through food safety, through gender, but also a lot in relation to digital transformation, where we played a role in coming up with some ideas what are the guiding principles of standards to be leading a digital transformation that is more ethical and brings us to the future. So we came up after some discussion on some guiding principles such as trustworthiness, inclusiveness, sustainability, interoperability, safety and security, as well as data privacy and international collaboration, as 7 principles that will guide the development of digital transformation. And in this, we have been just leading the discussion. We know that there are more specialized bodies, be it national standards bodies or other setups that are bringing this discussion forward. So we have been having this very well-established partnership. We 2 weeks ago launched something called the Quality Infrastructure Development Index, which shows in relation to people, planet, prosperity, what is the level of development, a benchmarking tool in relation to the development of the infrastructure in the country. So I would like just to say that it is important that we collaborate. We are not so specialized as many of you, but we can put everything under one umbrella. And this is the way we see our role, to bring it forward, to bring the message to the developing countries. And there is much more to be done. As a matter of fact, it is starting. We need to work for the benefit of developing countries, for the benefit of SMEs. And today I wish you a very good session in relation to this digital transformation, innovation, and standard-related initiatives. So thank you very much for participating in this session. Back to you.
Thank you, Fernando, for your statement. I'm now glad to give the floor to Ms. Laura Matthew, Technical Group Manager within the Standards Department of the International Organization for Standardization. For your opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me into your group of friends, as you put it. I'm not so familiar with this committee, but I'm very happy to be here. It's also really nice to be traveling again and really nice to be back in lovely Vienna. So thank you for inviting me to make some remarks before these 2 innovation labs, which will explore the link between innovation and sustainable development and the role of standards. Some of you have seen on the ISO website that we have the Sdg Mapping tool. This was created so that we would be able to demonstrate the impact of ISO standards on the UN SDGs. If you look at that webpage, it's clear that ISO standards do support all three pillars of sustainable development. First of all, we have the economic pillar by facilitating international trade, improving a country's quality infrastructure, and supporting sustainable business practices. It also supports the social pillar by improving healthcare systems and accessibility, as well as standards such as sterilization of medical products. And also on the environmental pillar, we help organizations manage their environmental impact through standards such as ISO 14001. But by far the most significant impact can be seen for SDG 9, where more than 13,000 standards are directly applicable to supporting industry, innovation, and infrastructure. For instance, if you look at the construction sector, ISO 52000 on energy performance of buildings helps architects and engineers assess the energy performance of new and existing buildings, while our standards on building environment design define methods for designing new buildings and retrofitting old ones to create fit-for-purpose indoor environments, and also to promote energy conservation and efficiency. And this is closely linked, of course, to smart cities, where ISO standards are being used to connect intelligent transport systems, boost efficiency of wastewater systems, and ensure the safety of citizens through standards on security and resilience. And considering that 2/3 of us are expected to live in urban settings by 2050, we really can't afford not to innovate in urban development. And if we think about urban development, then we also need to think about smart farming. ISO has recently launched a strategic advisory group to examine how standards can contribute to the digitalization of agriculture, to enable the best use of resources and also to maximize efficiency in food production. It's only by innovating that we can face the world's challenges head on, and innovation is underpinned by standards. You can think of standards maybe like the person in your team at work who doesn't draw very much attention to themselves, but somehow gets everything done, and without them you'd be lost. Some standards might not seem particularly important, like defining the right vocabulary for something. But without having that agreed terminology, working together would be much more difficult. Standards might also specify the right way to measure and test something so that we can be consistent in our methods. Or they might contain step-by-step guidance so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Actually, don't reinvent the wheel is our favorite phrase in ISO. And it's absolutely true that when it comes to innovation, we can save a lot of time and effort by building on the foundational work that's already been done, as this helps us to advance faster and for innovation to thrive. And of course, standards make it easier for products to be compatible with existing technologies. And so they can be introduced and accepted much faster into new markets. In areas like blockchain, information security, and IoT, standards ensure interoperability, which enables those technologies to flourish. And for small and medium-sized enterprises to apply those international standards and get a foothold in competitive markets. So now that I said a little bit about how standards can help to drive innovation and how this supports sustainable development, I'd just like to finish by saying a few words about how we at ISO are innovating to face the future. We've created a unit for research and innovation, which has been exploring foresight methodologies so that we can be better placed to adapt to change and be ready to create standards when the market needs them. Also, we've established a unit dedicated to sustainability to ensure that ISO keeps the SDGs in sharp focus in all of our work. We've also just initiated an international workshop agreement on net zero, which will help to move the global community from commitments to action by defining net zero and its related concepts and giving guidelines on how to incorporate this into initiatives, strategies, and policies at all levels. When published, this IWA can be used as the basis for accountability mechanisms and measurements on which reporting and communication can be based. Finally, in order to meet our strategic goals of ISO standards used everywhere and innovating to meet users' needs, we've embarked upon the SMART program, which will make standards usable not only by humans, but also readable by machines. And if I can just quote the tagline of our General Assembly, which was held in London in September 2021, the future has begun. So thank you once again for inviting me to take part in these fascinating innovation labs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. I would like to say that for Unido, is particularly we are very proud of this partnership with ISO, and we are glad to see that there are several initiatives from both organizations that can be leveraged together and have a promising future. Thanks very much, as we share common goals. And now we are particularly honored to have with us today His Excellency Professor Shem Kiev Reddy, Minister attached to the Prime Minister and Secretary of State, Ministry of Industry, Science and Technology and Innovation of Cambodia. His Excellency, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. It's looking at the setting of your room, the furnitures. It reminds me of the good old days when I was director of NAHU at the IAEA some 8 years ago. I'm still active member of the Standing Advisory Committee Group on a Nuclear Application, IEA. I hope that when the pandemic is subsiding, I could come to Vienna again. So I'm Mr. Gerd Müller, Director General of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, Mr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, Managing Director of Unido DTA, distinguished participants, good afternoon. Far beyond the research center, fab lab, prototyping facilities, small and medium enterprise to the group companies and government institutions, innovation is well understood as one, product innovation, a good or service that is significantly improved in technical specifications, components and materials, software in the product itself, with user experience design and functional characteristics. 2, process innovation as a novel or radically improved production or delivery method, including the significant changes in techniques, equipment, and or software for the resource efficiency. Number 3, marketing innovation, a new marketing method incorporating product design or packaging, product placement, product promotion, or pricing. Number 4, organizational innovation, which I think of a new organizational method in daily practices, workplace organization, or external relations. Taking this special occasion on behalf of the Royal Government of Cambodia, I would like to express my deep thanks and appreciation to Unido, the UN agency that provides a strong advocate for the use of standards to enhance prosperity and the well-being of people and to preserve the planet. To this end, Unido engages at all stages of all the standardization process, including advocacy, standardization, dissemination and implementation, outreach, and global partnership. Today's event in particular will further strengthen Unido's contribution in the standardization process for all stakeholders. Understanding the importance of science, technology, and innovation, the Royal Government of Cambodia puts forward a firm commitment by creating the Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology, and Innovation on March 13, 2020, just 2.5 years ago. During those 2 years, the ministry has remarkably produced many STI policies, STI roadmap, STI ecosystem of Cambodia, a national research agenda, research ethics, and priority technology roadmap, to name a few. Without true trust in science, technology, innovation, all these national guiding documents would not have been successfully designed and realized. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as a policymaker, I fully understand the prominence of systematic intervention to promote innovation through the building of national innovation system. The interdependency of all components of national innovation system must be correctly identified to ensure the well-function of the systems, while the influential and prominent challenges should be appropriately modeled and opted into actionable policies. Like other developing countries, Cambodia takes it seriously to build our foundation of national innovation system by strengthening the business system, education, research system, and most importantly, infrastructure, including banking, venture capital, intellectual property standards, and I mean it standards and norms. Note that the emphasis on standards could be tracked back to the cooperation and collaboration between our ministry and Unido since 2003, when Unido has been providing technical support and analytical instrument to our Industrial Lab Center of Cambodia, ILCC, which is now National Laboratory of Science, Technology, and Innovation. Since then, until the present day, and with our new mandate as a Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology, and Innovation, our lab, probably one of the best practice for Unido ISO Innovation Lab, continues to provide testing services and maintain ISO/IEC 17025/2017 as conformity of assessment bodies. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today's session is rightly and timely to leverage innovation and digital transformation as a key driver for promoting inclusive, gender responsive, resilient, and sustainable industrial development. Our 2-year experience of combating COVID-19 pandemic and its variants teaches us about the pivotality of digital transformation and the forced adoption of the Industrial Revolution. No one could imagine adapting the lifestyle of being digital nomad and remotely approving the ongoing office tasks on daily basis via WhatsApp, Telegram, or Zoom, for instance. This potential peril in all sectors leave us no choice but to innovate our way of life and therefore deliver our promise to our younger generation, the sustainable development. May I wish you all good health and this special session, Unido ISO Innovation Lab, a successful event. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, for sharing Cambodia's views and strategy to boost science, technology, and innovation standards for the benefit of your people and advancing the 2030 agenda. And now I will invite you to listen the pre-recorded speech from Ms. Valerie Hollinger, Managing Director of Austrian Standards International.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. When I joined Austrian Standards roughly 1.5 years ago, I was perplexed. Standards and innovation? Really? How can that work? How can something that is standardized, unified, measured, and proven have something to do with innovation? Better safe than sorry. That concept I have always understood. But innovation? By now I know standards and innovation have a great deal to do with one another. Innovations do not only find their place in standards, but standards drive innovations. They act as a sounding board for solutions and help make things safe and compatible. In fact, I would even go as far as to say innovation needs standards and standards need innovation. And when I look at the standardization projects that are currently underway at SAN and ISO, I can see our future, for example, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, smart cities, and so on. So standards open up windows for opportunities for us. We know, for instance, that there are organizational obstacles between different organizations. How can we overcome those obstacles more easily? That can be done with the help of standards. They bring together experiences, offer best practices, and show us how good looks like. And in a field as crucial as innovation, we do not want to rely on innovation by accident. Our aim is to make the innovation process efficient and measurable so that we all can profit from it. And therefore, it is vital that we do not reinvent the wheel again and again. That is also the reason why it is so important that experts from all countries, disciplines, backgrounds of expertise get involved in standardization. Standardization provides us with an ecosystem in which a problem that cannot be solved by a single person alone is discussed in a transparent, open, inclusive, multi-stakeholder process. And the outcome of this process is a proposal made to the market and society and how something can be done well. And in my mind, the work of TC 279 is a case in point. The list of organizations from Unido, OECD, WTO, UNESCO, working together with hundreds of standardization experts all over the world highlights the spirit of international cooperation. And the fact that OECD shows appreciation for the work of TC 279 in one of the international reference guides, namely the Oslo Manual 2018, is for me another indicator of the quality of the work accomplished to date. In Austria, more than 50% of our nearly 4,500 experts come from small and medium-sized enterprises. And I'm delighted that cooperation between ISO and Unido has recently produced the ISO Unido Handbook, and this provides clear guidance on the innovation management standard ISO 56002, especially for SMEs, and hence give them the opportunity to initiate or further develop innovations more easily. This can be a very helpful tool to drive innovation successfully. I have learned one thing. In standardization, you learn something new every day. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Ms. Madrid for this important message. With that, we conclude the opening remarks session. I will now want to thank all of the distinguished speakers, and I will invite you to go to the other side. Yeah, I will like to give the floor now to my colleague Fernando Santiago Rodriguez, Industrial Policy Officer at Unido, who will moderate the first lab on digital transformation and innovation ecosystem.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and those of you who are with us today here in the room, also to those online. Thank you very much for joining this session, this first lab on digital transformation and innovation ecosystems. My name is Fernando Santiago, already been introduced. I'm from Unido, and today I will be your moderator. And with me, I have the pleasure to have Mr. Marco Camilla, Chief of the Innovation and Digitalization Division at Unido, Ms. Irina Feigenbaum, Senior Manager for Digitalization and Innovation at TUB North Group, Mr. Hiro Nishiguchi, CEO from the Japan Innovation Network, Mr. Jose Augusto Aka Pinto de Abreu, Managing Director of Sextante Consultoria in Brazil, and Mr. Jivamalai Binanchiaraki, Principal Advisor of the Knowledge Management Associate here in Austria. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to Unido and to Vienna. The session will be as follows. Marco will start with a presentation, around 12 minutes, an overview of digital transformation and innovation ecosystems. After that, we will have I will invite the panelists to react to the presentation, to comment. Each of them will have an opportunity to answer two rounds of questions that would allow them to elaborate on the points that Marco raised during his presentation. And please, I will remind the speakers we have limited time, so maximum 3 minutes for your answers. And so, if we don't have any other business, let's start. Marco, please. I would like to ask you, how can we characterize innovation ecosystems? What is the relationship between innovation ecosystems and digital transformation? And what is the role that you need in this process? Yes, Marco.
Thank you, Fernando, and thank you all fellow panelists. I think this presentation is just an excuse to open the door for the great experience that we have around the table. So I just going to make a number of points in this panel to allow the panelists to expand further. I just want to say that we have this definition of innovation that comes from the, you remember the famous Frascati manual, when the OECD defined innovation as a producing a new good or producing a new process. So now today we have innovation in many areas, and it is not necessarily has a definition, it has several definitions, but I want to point out on two elements at the macro level and at the micro level. Let me see if this works. Okay, so this was the ranking of innovation ecosystem published by WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and you see by regions, countries topping the list of the most innovating countries, no? And of course, this is an aggregate of different variables that combine indicates what are the countries that offer a better innovation ecosystem. But we also use, let me see, there is some lack on it, but we also have this more recently discussion on a startup ecosystem, no? That is related with innovation ecosystem. And something that we see is that not necessarily the cities, because this is more when we refer to cities. This is not working well, but you will know, yeah? Okay, so what you see is that not necessarily the cities that are on the top of the startup innovation, not necessarily are the same, or there is a direct correlation with the countries that are on the top of innovation. So there is something and some components that are missing. We don't know exactly what they are. Probably you will say that the standards is, no? And we agree on this in part, yeah? But I just want to point out to provoke the discussion. No? So when we refer to innovation ecosystem, and this again, when we talk about macroeconomy, so everything has to do with macro policies. And then we have basic science, research and development, SMEs, startups and accelerator, plus finance. So these four components are necessary in order to have a good innovation ecosystem from a macro level. But you see, when there is this saying that when you have a hammer, so you try to solve all the problems with a hammer, no? And something that is very interesting in this last year, in particular at Unido, I have learned working with my colleagues under Bernardo, no? And very interesting, all these dimension on the standards, no? I don't want to say the standards explains everything, but definitely is extremely important. And what I want to show in the, this is moving, I cannot control this well, but what you see is the basic science in most of the developing countries are missing, no? The basic science. The basic science is not much produced in developing countries, and this is something that has to be imported. And this is an important component on the macro level innovation ecosystem. But one of the things is the micro level. The micro level has been gaining prominence in the last years as an important area of research. No? There are policies and also research that clearly shows that, for example, for a firm, when we refer to a firm, not a sector, but specific companies, no? We see that what is important is management skills. And by management skills is a combination of both. The capacity on the process, no? How the firm is organized in terms of the managerial process, and then how the manager allows for the people to work in an environment that they collaborate. So there are a number of recent research in this area that shows that this is a determinant on the success of a small and medium enterprise, sometimes even when the macro environment is adverse. And at the same level, we see also a number of studies showing that digitalization is essential for productivity and to have a successful firm. And also standards and norms, the interoperability. There's a number of studies and research showing this. So this is at the micro level, how important it is. So how do we do at Unido in terms of digitalization and digital transformation? So we have systematized this in a number of components, that is knowledge and skills, business environment, science, technology and innovation, business linkages, clusters, investment and industrial infrastructure, and quality and standards. So those are the main areas that we emphasize when we design technical cooperation. And then when we go further on a standard for digital transformation, so this is something you are all familiar. So this is on trustworthiness, inclusiveness, sustainability, interoperability, safety and security, data privacy, and international collaboration. And these are the components that we put together when we design technical cooperation for the countries. And when I say technical cooperation, somebody can say, you know, this is very small, it's just a small project that we're implementing in a country, but actually it is not. If we just leave it as a small technical cooperation, of course, it doesn't have much impact. But the idea is that this is a project that it has to be scaled up and it has to be replicated somewhere else in order to be successful, in order to learn when this is successful or when this is not successful. No? And for example, we have this project on using drones to analyze the health of the harvest in Namibia, applying artificial intelligence and drones. And we analyze the data, and this is what allows for commercialization of the products that are produced in the country. We have another project on blockchain and smart lenses for blockchain used for traceability and smart lenses used to provide remote technical assistance. This is another project mostly related with cluster on the automotive sector in Belarus, Colombia, and Mexico. This is a project on fishery using mobile applications and software end-to-end using cell phones. And those are examples of the technical cooperation that we would like to highlight that integrates these two perspectives. First, the macro perspective, the micro perspective, and on the micro, all these different areas that has to be put together in order to support small and medium enterprises. And I just want to say, one of the things is that in order to have successful SMEs, we also need to have successful large corporations. No? There is a recent study by UNTAC saying that one of the problems, one of the issues in Africa is that there are not enough large corporations. So this is something not necessarily everybody agrees, but this is something that I would like just to put on the table to open for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, and also for taking with sufficient time. Let me just now start the conversation. I mean, you brought to the table issues around macro and micro level factors that influence innovation, ecosystems, and also sort of standards. and then examples of some of the key enablers of digital transformation. But is that enough? Maybe, or is that everything covered? So maybe now start with Mr. Araki, just to ask you. As I mentioned, Marco introduced sort of top 3 innovation economies by region. But is there a way to really assess the extent of effectiveness of different types of innovation systems? Is that work, Mr. Araki?
On innovation systems across countries. Innovation systems can be classified into national, sectoral, and incremental. In an ideal national innovation system, there is a high degree of interactive framework between institutions, laboratories, and dynamic firms. New knowledge is generated by institutions, exploited by laboratories, and commercialized by dynamic firms. In sectoral innovation systems, some countries are doing extremely well. In fact, ideal national innovation system prevails in most developed countries, and the best example is Singapore. That's why it tops the list of countries on the rank of, on the scale of industrial performance. Some countries are doing extremely well in sectoral innovation systems, China in telecommunications, India in space research. Incremental innovation is totally different. They follow non-R&D route to be innovative through enhanced adaptive capabilities and skills to use modern technology and to commercialize new knowledge. Now, how to measure, how to assess the extent and effectiveness of all these systems of innovation? For that, I have coined the 18 indicators. For want of time, I cannot spell out everything. I will be very brief. There are input indicators and output indicators. Input indicators are related to technological efforts and innovation efforts. For example, the percentage of money spent on R&D as part of GDP, and the percentage of private sector money spent on R&D as a part of their gross revenue, and technology input intensity. Even the research papers written by research scholars with innovative ideas published in journals recognized by the Institute for Scientific Information. These are all input indicators. Output indicators, number 1 is number of patents registered. I can give you one example. In Sudan, a research institute discovered that the extract from a wild plant which grows in a desert, you don't plant, you don't water, you don't manure, it grows in spite of you. But the extract can kill the open wound of diabetic patients. It is remaining as a debt investment. The research finding is remaining as a debt investment for more than 20 years for want of technical assistance, finance, etc., etc. So if you don't have the adaptive capabilities and skills to commercialize modern, to use modern technology and to commercialize new knowledge, your research findings will not see the light of product development. Now, it is important to use some indicators to assess the distance of countries to the frontiers of best practice in national, sectoral, and incremental innovation systems, and to unveil viable avenues of reducing their distance to those frontiers of best practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for these comments. I think it's very important what you mentioned. It's important to know the context and also the nature of innovation and indicators. But Irina, let me just now ask you: is that this idea of innovations, incremental in developing countries, is the only kind of innovation? Is there any other kind of examples that you can share with us?
Thank you, Fernando, for this question. Before I answer that, I'd actually like to reflect also on what Marco showed in his slides, and specifically absence of basic science in the developing countries. And I think that's actually where the potential for innovation really is, for collaboration for innovation, because in order to create an innovation, it's not enough to invent. You have to bring it to the market. And the developing countries actually be offering their testing beds, so to say. They're offering a lot of potential for trying out the ideas, which we wouldn't be able to do in the developed countries because of some limitations, some legal limitations, financial limitations, and so on and so forth. So I find this is a really interesting point which you brought with developing countries. But back to the question which you asked about the incremental innovations only. Well, my answer would be, of course not. I'm working in a company which is globally present. We receive great innovation input from our colleagues from India, from China. They are very creative. They bring a lot of products and new services to the markets. So that's actually our internal example. If you look globally, there is probably not that much seen what comes into developed markets from developing countries, but we do definitely see those things happening. There are two concepts which I'd like to bring onto the table. One concept is called leapfrogging, and another concept is called reverse innovation. So in terms of leapfrogging, we really we see a lot of new technologies coming from the Western world, from the European countries, from the American countries, into the, for example, African countries, being adopted without skipping some of development phase. And I think that's where the potential is also in with digital technologies. We don't need to install the fixed telephone lines in Africa when we already have a mobile technologies. And this is one of the old examples, a classical one, but there's much more than that. And in terms of the reverse innovation, that's something where developing countries have been doing. They are aiming the segment where which people need. They're aiming for the things which can disrupt our market. Because to disrupt, you need two things. You need to be inferior in quality of product, but you have to have the better price. So aiming a low segment. And that's where the reverse innovation comes, like Tata Motors with the cars, which they've been developing for India, but small congested cities with a very good economic components, very cheap, which Europe got really interested in because we are having congested cities as well nowadays, and we are having families would like to spend less money on the cars. So there's a lot of examples. I have no time really to list them, but I really would like to point out that the collaboration for innovation is where we see the real potential in order to develop in one place and to adopt and implement and scale probably in another in developing world.
Thank you, Irina. And I think that's this idea that you bring not only technologies but also thinking on the technologies and how these address social problems. Right, that's one of the dimensions you mentioned in terms of transportation but I also find interesting now what you just the final comment on the collaboration aspect, which is I think innovation is a collaborative also endeavor, right? So. Which is not always considered, but maybe now turn to Hiro, and now based on your experience, maybe just ask you that if those size matter, right? So in terms of innovation, it's important to think of size. I mean, what can you tell us?
Well, thank you very much. Actually, there is a very widespread misunderstanding, probably around the globe, that startups do innovate, grown-ups do not. There is a very widespread misunderstanding. And it is true that startups around the globe are innovating. And I would say in every member state of the United Nations system, actually, we do have incubators, accelerator program in every country, I would say. But this is because they do have I would say, common language to speak with among startups, to speak with the capital market. Because the original common language came from Silicon Valley, but it spread it all over the place very quickly. So actually startups in Africa can speak with investors in India. Startups in India can speak with investor from Silicon Valley. So this is great. However, actually we have to also know that the successful startups will become so-called grown-up companies sooner or later than they should be. And also there are so many SMEs and large organizations around the globe. And it is true that some of the organizations are struggling to innovate, but because of the lack of a common language to work with. And that is why we are gathering in Vienna to talk about the innovation management system auditable standard. This is because targeting for existing organizations to innovate more effectively, more efficiently. And with that, I have to say, actually, good news for startups was they did have a good, common language, but good news and potentially, and hopefully very potentially good news for other SMEs and large organizations is now we are building a common language for us to innovate together. And also one more important thing is for actually having the common language for innovation management system for grown-ups, for existing organization is is good. It is good because it will help actually the conversation between startups and also grown-ups also as well. So actually what we are doing together as a jointly with Unido and ISO during this week is really to create a common language for every organization on this planet, regardless of the size, and to innovate and expandly. And I think that will be my response to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiro. I think it's, yes, I mean, it's really interesting, this debate, no? We focus a lot on the small companies where many of the companies that are already there, you know, this is debate between using the capacities that are already there to innovate and expanding the capacities on how to bring them together, right? So it's very also good that you also bring us back to the idea of a standard, right? So we've been a bit broad in the idea of innovation ecosystem, but now we're back to standards. And so moving to standards, Jose, would I could ask you, how could the standards, I mean, we have already heard some discussion in the previous panel, but how could the standards help make innovation ecosystems more dynamic?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And then I think it's a really interesting question. We are talking about innovation ecosystem, digitalization, but digitalization is a moving target. It's not a scenario that people will walk in and then will be there. It's always moving. So it requires continuously the capacity of innovating. And also it requires a lot of standards on the infrastructure to allow digitalization. Many people don't realize that. It thinks that's about startups and young guys with high tech doing things. But for that to happen, it requires a huge amount of standards, not just innovation standards, but reference architecture, interoperability, etc. So that's a huge amount of knowledge that is on standard that will help organizations to get into digitalization and also to innovate on that. But besides that, we need another part of the ecosystem that the society, in certain aspects, be friendly to that. So in many countries, we have a national digitalization strategy, and we have a national innovation strategy. Many times those national strategies don't reference standards, which becomes a gap on that. And then we have regulators, and we need to have a friendly environment on regulation in order to innovations come into the market. So that's why people are talking about having regulatory sandboxes to allow experimentation on new concepts, on new products. And then we have the grown-ups, as Hiro-san mentioned, SMEs also are there. So there's a lot of information on products, technology, and so on. But how do I do in order to have more efficient innovation? That is our bunch of standards. We are developing standards that deal some aspects of what is needed for innovation, things such as collaborative innovation, assessment of innovation, innovation management systems, intellectual property innovation and management. So this set of standards will be really helpful for all those aspects that digitalization poses to allow companies to more efficiently innovate. And one of our challenges it's also to get those interested parties knowing the standards that we are developing, that reach them and be used by them. I think this innovation standards could be a very helpful tool for enhance the digitalization national strategy and the innovation national standard strategies also. And this is a very useful tool to learn how to do better innovation. I think that's the main contribution that we can give for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, I think one of the key issues here, and I think when maybe the level that we are talking here, and we are not really addressing a lot, hopefully in the next session, in the next discussion, but this idea of experimentation, right? The policy experimentation is very important. As we talk about innovation, we also need to be able to understand that, you know, to what extent governments can innovate, and some of the way we do standards and the way we negotiate with the standards and collaboration is important. But let's move on, right? So now we have been from the perspective of this macro view of the innovation ecosystem. And now let me just focus a bit more on the issues of digital transformation. Right, so we have now a second set of questions. Let me just now start with you, Irina, and maybe ask you the digital transformation as the way we have seen now. It brings opportunities, but also brings challenges, right? And particularly in terms of changing the way we do business and approach many of the innovation problems, right? So from your experience with digital transformation in an international company, what would be required to foster digital transformation in the context of developing countries?
That's a very good question. And well, first to reflect on the experience which we've gone through our own digital transformation process. We learned that it's more about change than about digital. So then it's then about technologies. And the change is something which happens in the heads of people. It's a new ways of work. It's a new skills which you need. It's also new processes. It's digitalization of business. Another thing which we learned is that we shouldn't separate between digitalization and innovation. In this thing, we are now treating it as future digital innovation, basically, and without dividing into digitalization innovation. I think that's very important that those two pieces are talking with each other. Usually in the companies, there's different people responsible for one or another, and sometimes they don't even communicate. So we should treat that as one, because once transformation is over, what is left is a digital innovation in principle of the future. Here, I believe that the standards actually helping us a lot, because if we say that innovation is what's left after that, we need to be able to track the progress. We need to be able to have a system to rely upon. That's where we can really turn towards the whole family of standards of innovation management, and definitely it will help us to get the structures which are needed for transformation as well. Building on what I've said about the leapfrogging before in regarding to the developing countries, I also believe that in terms of digitalization or transformation, you don't need to transform when you don't have the things to transform. So there's many structures, like we as a 150-year-old company have a lot of things we have to unlearn. For the young ones, for the markets which are dealing with a particular process for the first time, they don't need to unlearn, they just need to create. And that's where the advantage of developing countries in many places is. So we're not talking about transformation per se, probably in many sectors, we're talking about born digital, talking about the things which are becoming digital. And I believe that there is strong focus, the cornerstone of the thing is people, enabling them develop capabilities which are needed for this world, which are needed for future. They need the data literacy. The governments need to create the frameworks to protect own people in terms of how they deal with the data, teach them to go around with the data and teach them to process data in terms of data science, for example. The future is digital, the future is data-based, future is online. We have a lot of businesses who are coming in that field. And that's what I believe is going to be the future also for the developing countries. They need, and the people in the corner as a cornerstone of it all, enabling lifelong learning, online courses. And we see actually nowadays that the developing countries are jumping on that offer. In the pandemic, we see that the most demand for online courses for the education, for the reskilling and upskilling, so to say, comes from those countries. And that's wonderful. I think we should really continue in providing the support and infrastructure there.
Thank you. And I think these issues of capabilities, I think one of the key issues that we are concerned is capabilities. And you not only identify the idea of skills in terms of people, but also you identify capabilities in terms of how then these people are organized. Right? We tend to seek a sort of narrow view of the scope of education systems. But then what happens when those students become workers or become professionals? The way the companies are organizing activities and really capturing the potential of these people, I think is important. But and along in these lines of capabilities, Arachi, maybe if I can continue with you, would the creation of innovation labs equipped with all the forms of digital technologies and digital technologies, is that sufficient to promote the required digital culture and capability towards the digital transformation journey that we started discussing?
We are living in an era of creative destruction. So the so-called tinkering lab of innovation lab should be equipped with disruptive technologies. They are the one triggering the so-called creative destruction. So a good tinkering lab is supposed to be equipped with advanced production, digital production system, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, additive manufacturing, big data management, cloud computing, then 3D printers, Internet of Things, electromobility, then Internet of Services, and also MindNet. So it is a matter of making optimal use of all these things contained in the digital format for digitalization. It's important to realize that digitalization will not automatically lead to digital transformation. And digital transformation is the outcome of innovative management. Because very often we think that digital transformation leads to innovative management. No. In fact, digital transformation is the function of innovative management. So what is needed is the training of the innovative management personnel. They should have the capacity to acquire the right technology, assimilate the technology, adopt it, adapt it, learn. Learn to do what? Learn to invent something that befits their context. If it is a private sector enterprise, profit-making enterprise, the challenge is to make optimal use of what is available in the tinkering lab for producing optimal output at the least cost combination of factors of production. If it is a non-profit international organization, the objective is to make an impact and compact on the welfare of the people with a programmatic accent on economic efficiency, ecological compliance, and social inclusion. That's totally different. It's all eventually related to capacity building and capability building. So the key message is that organizations and companies will have to invest on innovative management capabilities. According to research findings, 87% of digital transformation failed for want of this. It's almost like saying, and having a nice blueprint for change management. So who is going to manage the change? If you don't have efficient management to manage the change management will fail. Thank you.
Thank you, Arachi. I think, again, it's the reiteration of the symbiotic relationship between, infrastructure in terms of laboratories and, research laboratories or quality laboratories, but also the people and the organizational aspects. So the soft and the hard come together, right? But now, again, let's go back a bit to the idea of how do we go away from the micro perspective of the companies or the laboratories into more of the decision-making process, right? So, Hiro, you have a lot of experience as an advisor on these areas of innovation management, particularly with senior staff from public and private organizations. So maybe can you share some of the experience or some of what would be your advice in terms of what does it take to run successfully a project that involves private sector digitalization standards in sort of the context of developing countries? I mean, it's a broad question, but maybe you can give some examples based on your experience.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to actually share some ongoing real case with the audience. We are working with, unfortunately, not the Unido, but with the UNDP. I'm sorry about it, but we are working with the UNDP. Actually, we are operating the joint open innovation platform, which is called SHIP, SDG's Holistic Innovation Platform, since 2016. So we are, I think, back in 2016, we thought that SDG is a wonderful opportunity for innovation for everybody. So we created this platform, and right now, actually, UNDP has a so-called accelerator labs around the globe, and one of the labs have proposed the problem, basically the plastic garbage in the ocean in Philippines and Vietnam, and they wanted to solve the problem. So the Japan Innovation Network and the UNDP and the Cabinet Office Japan decided to work together on this project. And problems were identified in Vietnam and the Philippines. And the next step was actually to find a partner to design the business model together. Okay, not work on the solution, but a business model to solve the problem. And then we went through some selection process. We have identified the grown-ups who are willing to work with UNDP and other stakeholders. And in that process, obviously, we have engaged the government from Philippines and Vietnam and other stakeholders in each country. And we identified that, we often talk about garbage, plastic garbage bottles in the ocean, but nobody is actually throwing plastic bottle into the ocean directly. Actually, people are doing it in the river. Okay, so the river will carry the old garbage to the ocean. That's also a problem. And in the long, journey in the river, there are not only plastic, but there are so many different kinds of garbage on the floating. And then we decided that we need a digital transformation to identify only plastic garbage from satellite, so that they can at a pinpoint area to actually clean up during in the river. And so that grown-ups and DP and government and the stakeholder worked all together to design the business model to make it happen. Then they also worked on the invention, basically new technology to identify only plastic bottle among all garbages. And they did it. They have actually invented a new technology to identify plastic bottles in the river. And then they're working they're still working on the business model, but we use actually ISO 56002 as a common language for all stakeholders, because in the standard, we have an operation, meaning innovation operation, which is we have to identify opportunities, then we have to create this concept, then we have to validate the concept. In this concept means we do with the value creation concept, meaning business model. From private sector, it's a business model. From Unity's perspective, it's a value creation model. From government perspective, it's a value creation model, also for citizens, also for environment. So in short, we used the standard as a common language for all stakeholders to work together, but also by bringing some photos, by encouraging invention, also coming from grown-ups. But at the end of the day, what we did was to design and implement business model to really improve, to achieve the sustainable goals. So I would say the keyword is, again, two keywords: business model. Instead of not only invention, but the business model is so important for every stakeholders. Then, of course, invention to some extent, but also common language, which was a standard in our case. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hiro. Fascinating story. I mean, particularly the way you sort of bring together technologies, standards, and the social aspect. So you had to have a sort of a mission-oriented process, right? So that you can bring together all the different pieces for the puzzle. But let me just continue in this same line now with you, Jose. Again, let me, although Hiro already introduced a bit of the idea of the standards, but can you give us some additional examples? But now perhaps focusing on SMEs, right? So there's a lot of interest in SMEs. I mean, in the end, we understand Hiro is a bit of, in favor of the large ones, but what about SMEs? What standards can help? How can standards help SMEs in developing countries overcome some of the challenges of digital transformation?
Thank you. It's a very interesting question. Actually, when we talk about digitalization of the economy, many times we think in big companies, or when we talk about SMEs, we look at the SMEs as themselves isolated, just delivering services or products for the market by themselves. But actually, one of the key aspects of digitalization are the supply chains. And the supply chains, they have a huge tail that include many SMEs. And in order for the big company, the anchor company, be successful, he needs that all the elements, all the tiers in the supply chain also are able to introduce those technologies. And therefore, and particularly in developing countries, those SMEs, despite the challenge of adopting and implementing these technologies, they need also to overcome some differences and lack of infrastructure and so on. So it's key for them to be able to innovate, to maintain themselves as a suppliers. And it's not only their solitary challenge, actually it's a challenge of all the supply chain or the anchor company. And that's where in a very paradigmatic, almost didactic situation appears the collaborative innovation and partnerships, because all the elements on that supply chain need to cooperate themselves in order for every node, every tier of the supply chain be able to follow the step of the anchor company. So one of the huge challenges today on SMEs are on the side of the SMEs that are part of the long supply chains and where they most need the standards that could help them to overcome these difficulties and maintain themselves as suppliers in that network around the world. I think it's very important. And then, again, there are other actors that can contribute for that. Public policies, governments, the national institutions that support SMEs. For all of those actors, also the standards provide a reference and tools to implement that. And it's actually a situation of innovation management system of the whole chain of the whole process and that sector. And I think this is one of the huge contributions that those standards can give on maintaining SMEs competitive and being part of the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much for that. Again, reiterating the idea of collaboration between large and big, but not only in a sort of commercial relationship, but really in a sort of symbiotic, mutually beneficial. I mean, Marco, you've been sitting quite quietly and listening to those comments. So maybe, maybe just a couple of minutes to react to some of the comments and issues raised by the panelists.
Okay, thank you very much, Fernando. No, very interesting, very refreshing, all the comments. I want to say on this leapfrogging. So this is a key concept. I used to live in Nairobi before coming to Vienna, and there is a financial innovation. It's called M-Pesa. So using cellular phones, the whole financial sector was improved, providing credit, providing access to finance, even in rural areas, even in informal settlements. On digitalization, we were recently discussing with the Vice Minister of Industry in one of the developing countries we are working, and he said, we want all stakeholders working with SMEs to go beyond something that I will call the fetishism of digitalization. And what is this? What is this? He said that everything is solved by digitalizing. No? And of course, I see we agree. We agree with this. Digitalization is a tool. No? And why is this? What is more important than digitalization? Is for SMEs to understand where are the technologies and if it makes sense in terms of the budget, in terms of cost benefit, to digitalize. Maybe they don't need to digitalize. Maybe they need to digitalize just one sector, one production process, but not the whole. Because if we digitalize everything, at the end, the company should be producing without human intervention, and this is not what is possible. So that's what he was claiming, to go to help companies to know what are the technologies, to help the companies to understand how to implement progressively, incrementally digitalization. And then Hiro, very interesting, this idea on this project that you show, that you describe on Accelerator. And one of the things, I'm sure I agree with you, you haven't said much, but the problem is on the design of the idea and the finance. It's how to put together these two, because we have in all developing countries marvelous ideas, very dynamic entrepreneurs, young people that understand the context, but they design a challenge, they design the solution, but then they don't have the finance. And then one of the main problems, I think, we have to think about how to solve that.
Thank you, Marco. And of course, in the interest of time, and because I'm simply not able to summarize the whole discussion, I would just like to thank again the panelists, Marco, of course, for setting the scene, and the panelists for very interesting comments, conversation. I'd like to thank you also for your patience and those online for being with us. And I will just, allow the time for the next session. Thank you very much. And thank you much for the invitation to be with you. Thank you.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And we would like also to at least recognize those who are online. I don't know how many of them are still keeping up with us. We would like to start a new lab called Lab Innovation, and we'll focus more on standards for sustainable development. I may add sustainable development goals, because we as the world, we would like in 2030 to make it for a brilliant world, for a world much more peaceful, a world much more sustainable, inclusive, and prosperous. I will start saying the new focus or slogan of Unido, progress by innovation, may have an extension. And the extension could be, obviously, sustainability through standards. And I think this is an extension which is just helping us to make innovation serve the purpose of the entire planet of countries. And today we are going to see so far what the expert here with me and those who are online, the panelists, the experience in their daily work, what they have been doing to make really standards work for sustainability. So the time is pressing, because if we refer standards and sustainable development goals, so it means 2030. We have now a few years to go. And this is the challenge, and this is the way an appeal to you experts on standards, that please help us, and you have a lot to do in the next years to come. So in 2030, we can make it to reach the SDGs. I wanted also to say that here we are not saying policy, regulations. We are not talking about that. We are saying standards, which are normally volunteer. But the previous panel, they mentioned it very well. I think there was one panelist who mentioned standards because it is just pushing us to talk the same language, to act the same way, to harmonize. And I would like really to thank the panelists for giving us that good idea. So the same language, so we can act all on the same direction and to reach the development, the sustainable development. Here I have with me Cindy Parroquill, who is working for BSI, but he's a government engagement manager. He's going to make for this panel a presentation which can set the scene and helping us to think about the connection and the relationship between standards and development goals, sustainable. We have also here in the chair, high table, we call it in another part of the world, the high table. We have here also another expert, Mrs. Ana Sanchez Granados, who is an expert on systems and assessment from the Spanish Association of Standards. Welcome. So I'm very happy also, and I'm impatient to learn about what you're going to share with the audience. From the other side, I may have started with him. We have the Director General of the Indonesian Standards Institution, Mr. Kuku Ahmad, who also, like the Japanese last time, I think it's late, but he decided obviously to remain with us, and will be making his presentation online. Welcome, Mr. Kuku. We have also another panelist, not here on ground. So Mrs. Lena Dargam, who is the Director General of the Lebanese Standard Institution, with a lot of international experience. Welcome, Ms. Lena. And last but not least, my colleague, Juan Pablo Davila, who is, I think he is also in the premises of the VIC, but he will be joining us online. Juan Pablo Davila is an industrial development officer, and he used to be my colleague in the same floor for many, many years. And I know his experience on quality, but not only, I think experience and also, let's say, experience and knowledge on innovation. He has been trying a lot of new technology application in developing countries. Welcome, Juan Pablo. So without any more bothering you with my speeches and my, let's say, my comments, I would like to give the floor to Cindy, who's going to set the scene, and you will see, I think, a lot of good ideas, but also sometimes provocative things between standards, regulations, and I think it will set the scene for us to start this panel. Cindy, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Raymond. It's such a pleasure to be here. So thank you so much for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here on home ground and to be able to talk to you about the role of standards for sustainable development. So in the next 12 minutes or so, I'll start off by outlining what the key challenge is that standards in the wider quality infrastructure system can address. Then I will explain how we can address this challenge by leveraging infrastructures that exist. And finally, I'll conclude by providing some recommendations and very pragmatic in terms of how we can make standards-led growth a reality. Next slide, please. Awesome, thank you. All right, so sustainable growth is the challenge we face over the next decade. And the World Economic Forum has beautifully put this together by highlighting the extent of this challenge, which ranges from economic factors to environmental, societal, technological, and geopolitical. So touching upon all the 3 Ps from the SDGs, and we need to tackle them head on. And the answer really lies in the combination between digital transformation and sustainable transformation. But the barriers for both the transformations lies in a lack of harmonized rules and standards, lack of clarity in terms of the regulatory framework, and also cybersecurity issues. And the reason why I'm picking up on the cybersecurity point is that without digital technology, we won't be able to obtain sustainable growth. And although COVID has rapidly expanded the use of digital technology, it has created another pandemic in itself, that of cybercrime and digital identity theft. And standards have a fundamental role to play in addressing this and building trust in this transformation, which is absolutely critical. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, sustainable growth needs to be underpinned by digital technology, and we need to address this key barrier, which is building trust in digital trust, as well as trust in systems transformation. And as the World Economic Forum very eloquently puts, digital trust is the currency that facilitates future innovation. And in order to improve digital trust, we need intentional and persistent trust building initiatives. And that is exactly what the international standards infrastructure offers. So what do we mean with digital trust? We need to be sure that the information systems are secure, cybersecurity is there, that data is protected, our privacy is protected, digital ID and provenance is not tampered with, and the interoperability of systems is ensured, semantic and the security aspect of it as well. And if we look at the other side of the coin, which is net zero, we need confidence in net zero accounting, solutions, and delivery. And as the UN Secretary General highlighted in his opening remarks at COP26, standards are fundamental in measuring the outcomes of net zero initiatives, let's say. And ISO has developed a suite of standards in that respect. And Laura also mentioned the IWA, which is the guiding principles for net zero that we're developing and should be launched by COP27. Those are all fundamental. But standards have a much larger role to play. Standards have a fundamental role to play in implementation and delivery of net zero as well. Next slide, please. So how do we enable this transformation? We need a very holistic approach that sort of encompasses all the 11 bricks in my bridge there. But the main point, going back to the point of trust, is that standards and quality infrastructure system is the missing keystone in the bridge to a sustainable and green economy. Regulation is absolutely necessary in building trust in this space. However, the issues that we're grappling with sort of transcend national borders. So the truth of the matter is that there are no global regulations, and it's very difficult to aspire for that, and it may not even ever happen. But that is where the value of standardization comes into play, because standards transcend borders and boundaries. Standards transcend borders and boundaries. They ensure this creation of a global trust, and that is why we should put a focus on standards. Next slide, please. So establishing a robust framework of trust, it all comes back to quality infrastructure system. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this diagram, Raymond, where trust is really built on deep engagement with the entire ecosystem. So this means regulators, governments, industry, academia, consumers, civil society, name it. It is really all about that. And the international standardization system, so here I refer to ISO IEC, really is all about that. It is convening the ecosystem to build consensus. So international standards offer policymakers an additional policy tool to keep up with the rapidly changing technology and to achieve their policy objectives. And some of the leading thinkers would even go as far as saying standards should inform regulation rather than the other way around. And from the business perspective, standards offer businesses a tool to comply with market requirements. And this is really fundamental in this transformation. And so when I was writing this white paper on the role of standards to achieve net zero, we did some research to understand the uptake of standards, both in the developed and developing world. And what was very clear is that standards do play a fundamental role in the transformation in the developed world, whereas in the developing world, it's unfortunately not the case. And there are multiple reasons for that, including lack of capacity and resources. Next slide, please. But the main point here is that an active standards policy confers significant benefits on the economic front, on the business front, and in relation to consumers, and really touches on all aspects of the economy and SDGs as well. And the stats that you see in front of you come from the latest report in the UK about the economic benefits. And I must say that this is the third time we're doing this assessment, and the results have been consistent. But it's not just the UK, Germany, France, and the Nordic countries have done their own assessments as well. And the results are very comparable. So it is a very compelling story that we just need to elevate to policymakers and the wider ecosystem. Next slide, please. But standardization is not bulletproof. We do have some drawbacks as well, similar to those of regulation, where standardization is often or may be criticized that it doesn't keep up with the change in pace of technology. And to address that gap and to really reap the benefits of standardization throughout the process, we have developed Agile approaches to standardization. So we have publicly available specifications, which are developed when new concepts are widely accepted and minimal change is required. So there are a few examples of energy smart appliances, battery, and hydrogen. And then there's also the example of BSI Flex standards, which is basically developed when the there's a lack of certainty in terms of what good looks like, and there needs to be more iterations to define what it should be like. And we have one on digital twins. And I'd also like to make the point that a lot of these standards go into the ISO system to form international standards as well. Next slide, please. And here's an example of how BSI is working hand in glove with government and industry to really transform the energy sector by conducting standards foresight activities, creating a roadmap to enable this transformation. And this diagram is very busy, and it really shows that it is extremely complex, not least for the interoperability of different systems. I mean, we need to be sure that the lights are not going to be off when they're sourced by renewable sources. And if you look a bit closer, you'll see that there are PASs, BSI standards, ISO standards. So there's a rich combination. And this is really what the BSI strategy is all about, making sure that we elevate the national experience to the international one when relevant. Next slide, please. So my main message is that international standards and national standards bodies need to be seen as agents of change and need to be at the heart of innovation policy and economic development. We talk a lot about research and development, the importance of that, but without standardization, we can't scale up innovation. So it really is all about that. And standards really touch upon all the key economic development factors that I have listed there. But in order to really make this a reality, we need partnerships. And I've listed a few pragmatic things that we can do to make this a reality. So we need to raise awareness of public and private sector on the role of standards as both a policy and a business tool. We need to work with government to develop an active standards policy in key priority areas. We need to conduct standards foresight activities and develop roadmaps that not only meet the current need, but also of the future. Capacity building is absolutely fundamental. So creating toolkits to increase the adoption is very important. And we need to work with the UN, the development banks, and international and regional bodies to really embed standards into policies, metrics, and strategies. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I'd like to say standards and quality infrastructure system plays a key role in building trust and supporting government industry on the path to sustainable development, complementing legislation and regulation. Standards can further and scale up innovation. Standards and national standards bodies, I need to emphasize that, need to be perceived as an agent for change, as they provide this platform for collaboration, to build consensus, to identify, define what good practice looks like. And by convening the so-called ecosystem and bringing together this diverse set of expertise, we can develop solutions that address the biggest challenges of society. And finally, I'd like to just leave you with one food for thought. And that is, as a few of you may know, we at BSI, we've developed a digital toolkit to help, or a training program to really help policymakers and industry understand how standards can help build trust and how national standards bodies can be an agent of change. So perhaps with Unido and this community here, we can extend that and see how can we use this for net zero or transforming priority sectors. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you for your attention.
Impressive. I would like to clap for you, obviously, because I need to say also, this young lady used to work with us. She used to be a colleague and Unido. So you have experience also here on quality. It was impressive because you mentioned on your presentation, setting the scene, many concepts. And I remember you were very fast talking also, but today I was impressed by the fact that you didn't take the time. And I hope that to refresh your mind, that I think she mentioned the fact that standards transcend the borders, the boundaries. It's better than, maybe it's doing it well than regulations. Robust trust framework is needed. Harmonize also is needed. So that's why the harmonization and talking the same language, the fast track, maybe innovation, but fast track also the acceleration, the adoption of new technologies and the sustainability standards to transform regulations or to inform regulations. Sorry about that, not the other way around. And so also active standards policy. So it means the word policy, I was thinking we didn't use it here, she used it. And she used also an agile approach to standardization to enable innovation and standards foresight, which I used to technology foresight. First time I hear standards foresight. Thank you for bringing that also to me. I'm curious to know about that later. Partnership need, also the need we are saying about collaboration. It's another also slogan or topics, and to scale up innovation. All of that in 10 minutes, you said it. Here, so my colleagues, Anna, so you will be the first. to take the floor. And my question would be, Anna, according to you, what are the most relevant aspects of standards and quality, obviously, for sustainable development? I know what we discussed, but today you saw the presentation. What is the most, or what are the most relevant aspects of standards for sustainability?
Thank you, Raymond. Well, first of all, I'm going to be so slow because I don't manage the language as you. But I'm sorry. Let me before answering your question, say thanks to Unido and for giving me the opportunity to be here. For me, it's amazing. It's so exciting. And I tell you later why. And to my Spanish organization for standardization, because as most of you know, they were pioneers in starting the certification model of innovation management systems. Yesterday, when I was talking with Magnus, I saw him there, we realized that it's 20 years far from here. We started, Spanish organization started their activities in 2002. And with the pioneers, Fernando Trilla, I don't know if he's right there, but Gerardo Malvido is there. They got encouraged to ask FEM to develop our European Technical Committee in 2008. So later, next step, with our best ever convener, Leopoldo Colombo, had our working group in the ISO. So finally, if we are here, it's amazing to see that we are all working in an ISO, in a global standard. And it's like a dream come true for me. When I started 20 years ago with my first innovation management system audit. So answering your question, well, we are all really aware, and we talked a lot about the long-term effects of standardization, and we have a lot of scientific articles and works like you showed. And also, everybody knows that knowledge, technology, talent, people, and innovation, of course, are the best way to reach economic and social needs. Standardization codifies and diffuses codified knowledge that comes from all over the world, from best practices. So I think that one of the most important aspects that standardization contribute to is, and I keep your idea, is shared responsibilities, collaboration, building shared stakeholders' vision, and because it's all about people building trust. Yeah, it's all about, but not only trust related to processes, related to regulation, is about clear communication. It's about a common language, to share knowledge, to train, to enable people act. And that's the point. I love this concept. I have been working for so long in technology transfer processes in academic and professional field. And I really believe that the huge knowledge we have in our research centers can be transferred to create value to face our global challenges. And as all of you know, we have a lot of tools in technology transfer models. One maybe collaboration projects in research, but the other one, someone told, I think the chief of Unido, Marco, told the importance of the deep tech startups. But deep tech startups are run by scientific entrepreneurs. And they know a lot about technology, but they don't know so much about innovation management. And all of the parts need to understand all the innovation process at all in order to take a successful results and find out and solve the problems, the global challenges we have. So we must be fast to face all challenges, and standards are an opportunity to accelerate the change.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna, because you reminded us the long-term, like you were saying, long-term role of standards, and which is obviously, not against what Cindy mentioned before, agile and active. You mentioned also best practices. So it means you use another way to define the standards, best practices, and share responsibility. I like that fact because it's going along the line of the sustainability, where we know and we all need to accept that we need sustainability. But the main one you mentioned is building trust. I remember when I started was building trust for trade, building trust for innovation, building trust for new technologies. Thank you for sharing with us your thought. I will go now to the DG of the Indonesia Standard body, Mr. Kuku. I wanted to ask you, considering the Indonesian commitment on green economic development and also on innovation and digital transition, so where do you feel standards or quality infrastructure in Indonesia should focus more in order to fast track the process? I call it of decarbonized economy, but it is the process of sustainability. Where do you think that your country need more through standards to focus in the next years?
Thank you, Raymond. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes. Thank you, Raymond. First of all, good evening from here in Jakarta, Indonesia. Good afternoon to you all in Vienna. So first of all, I would like to thank Unido for giving me the opportunity for joining this important session. So in answering your question, Raymond, I think I catch some keyword here about the Indonesia commitment, and then also the focus on the standard, to you call it to fast track the decarbonized economy. So with regard to your question, I think I would have to refer to the commitment of our government, the Indonesian government, during the COP26 last year in Glasgow, that there was two main issues that have been presented to the forum regarding the one that we need to prioritize or to focus on, especially in standard. The first keyword is to minimize the deforestation, because Indonesia, we have at least in the year 2021, we have around 95 million hectares of forest. And then the second keyword is also Indonesia is now developing the ecosystem for electric cars, because the growth of the use of the motorcycle or the cars with the machine combustion keep growing. So I think they produce the emission of carbon that we need to control or to minimize that. So to respond to those two keywords, so I think as the national standardization body of Indonesia, so BSN, we are also government institution. No, we have been preparing, or we have been formulating several standards in relation, first of all, with the environmental management. So, for example, like ISO 14001 or 40,000 series, and also we have been preparing or formulating standard relating to how to quantify greenhouse gases emission, as well as, of course, because we are now also developing the ecosystem for electric cars, we have also formulated some standard, national standard for electric vehicle like battery, etc. At the same time, Raymond, so we need also to make sure that the conformity assessment bodies are available, because we need to verify, or we need probably to test, probably to validate the implementation of those standards. So we have been operating, because BSN is also responsible in carrying out the conformity assessment in Indonesia, of course, through the third-party certificate conformity assessment bodies. So we have been operating, for example, certification for 14,001 for many years, and then one that quietly new being operated is on the management and energy management based on ISO 50,001, and then of course for greenhouse gases. And we have also our national program on forest management, the sustainable forest management. So we also conducting certification to the forest management, to make sure that we can control the carbon emission. And luckily, because in Indonesia, BSN or our national standard are part of government, so we are mostly been involving by regulators when they are formulating the regulation in relation to how to realizing the target of the government in terms of our commitment during COP26. So the certification system for those standards also mostly developed by our regulators. So hopefully with focusing on two sectors, which is for deforestation and developing ecosystem for electric cars, we can fast track, like if I may echo your word, Raymond, to fast track the process towards decarbonized economy. Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you, Kuku, and I appreciate your being very soft, because you mentioned regulation, which yesterday what we discussed, you were just saying it's very important that we regulate, and so, but you started after the presentation of Cindy's talking about the standards you set, and after that, because she was saying the standards to inform the regulation, so the balance need to be found there. And so it means you need to enforce also regulation, but you said it in a very soft manner. I like it. Thank you very much for your intervention. And
You're
so also for being there, it's too late in Indonesia. We are going to ask to Miss Naulena from Lebanon, asking you, I hope everything is fine there.
More or less, I thought about it.
Yeah, what is the relationship, Elena, between the standard quality and the SDGs in Lebanon? Is it very evident? Is it smooth? Because we talk about that, it seems that it's obvious, but is it the case in Lebanon?
Thank you, Raymond, and good afternoon, everyone. Very pleased to be with you today. Well, in Lebanon and in the context of developing countries, if I may say, well, Cindy mentioned earlier in her presentation the top challenges that the world will be facing in the next 5 years. And on top of these challenges, of course, the war in Ukraine has dramatically worsened the economic outlook, especially in developing countries that are already struggling from a very slow recovery after the pandemic. High energy and commodity prices, rising inflation, slow growth, increased poverty, as well as the renewed supply chain disruptions that are increasing these challenges. So the question is, how can standards remain relevant in this outlook? How can they remain a reliable solution to governments, policymakers, and businesses in the coming years, and continue supporting the 2030 agenda, especially in developing countries, with all these challenges that we have mentioned, and in addition to a weak quality infrastructure? Of course, we can say a lot on how standards contribute to sustainable development and economic growth, but I think in the context of developing countries in general, 3 areas, in my opinion, are specifically important: measurement, innovation, and trust. Standards are considered as an important tool to measure the progress made in achieving the SDGs and manage the environmental impact. They are actually needed to measure the impact of also the investment, the collective investment in sustainable development, to have a common understanding on how to assess the effectiveness of such funding, the social, environmental, and financial returns. On another hand, we have spoken about, a lot this week about standards and innovation, but in the context of developing countries, this will definitely drive economic growth, the development of the society, and an increased well-being. And last but not least, trust. Standards play a crucial role in improving the quality infrastructure, which is the source of trust. And Cindy mentioned that this is the robust framework for trust for businesses, for governments, and consumers and trade. And of course, to lower the cost of developing and enforcing regulations for policymakers. And this is where I will highlight the Lebanese situation and mention, you asked me earlier, Raymond, how is it in Lebanon now? So I'll give you some figures and try to highlight an example on how standards were effectively contributing to SDGs in the context of a severe economic crisis. So, as some of you may know, Lebanon is suffering from a severe and prolonged economic depression that is, according to the World Bank, likely to rank in the top 3 most severe crises globally since the mid-19th century. Poverty has spread dramatically over the past year and now affects about 74% of the population. We host approximately 1.5 million refugees. 90% of them live in extreme poverty, and with a population, Lebanese population of 4.5 million. And the Lebanese pound has lost 90% of its value just in 2 years. Most people have only 2 hours of electricity per day, and the healthcare sector is at a breaking point. Not to mention the fuel prices that have increased by a factor of 25 in just 2 years, with a historical rate of inflation. Of course, all these challenges have affected the priorities of the government and the progress made in achieving the SDGs. And we are currently struggling not only to meet the 2030 goals, but in sustaining the basic needs of the population. The shortage in energy supply and the short of money of the government to import fuel for the state electricity company and diesel for private generators, and the need to have sustainable and cheap sources of energy have pushed the Lebanese population, households, universities, factories, hospitals, water utilities to invest in solar energy. In the past 10 years, Lebanon was only able to bring around 100 megawatts of solar from private installations, despite all the awareness and bank credits facilities that were created. But in just 1 year, within this crisis, it has brought 250 megawatt during, this specific year. The number of solar companies have increased to more than 400 from 130 just a year ago. And the business now is worth like $300 to $400 million a year. Now, and the problem that we have faced the issue that many of these are not professional and install equipment in a potentially dangerous way, with users at risk of being electrocuted and of their solar panels being blown away by high winds and not functioning properly. And this had a negative impact on the use of solar by consumers and the lack of trust in the system, and to lose the gains that we had in this year. So the need was urgent to regulate the market in a quick way and build trust. So this is where standards and LIBNOR, the Lebanese Standards Institution, played an essential role in providing the needed standards for solar panels, inverters, batteries, smart systems, and we collaborated closely with the existing quality infrastructure institutions to ensure that these installations were complying to standards. And even we have introduced these standards in the conditions for obtaining bank loans for solar energy. And this wasn't easy in a weak quality infrastructure, but it was very important. And what is more important is that the challenges that we were facing, the economic challenges, were transformed to opportunities. The economic situation and the current crisis has made solar energy a much needed commodity to cover the absence of normal utility supply. And this will have a significant impact, not only on the economy as a whole, since all business activities need electricity, but also in tackling different sustainable development goals like the well-being of the society, clean energy, water, the industry, and others. So, and this once again, proves that standards and a strong quality infrastructure are at the heart of the action on climate change and the economic recovery, and a reliable tool for governments, industries, and consumers, even in critical and complex contexts and in economic crisis like the one that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lina. Impressive also, and sorry about the situation of the country, but obviously we are confident with institutions and professionals like you. Obviously the country will recover, we hope, very, very quickly and soon. Thank you for mentioning that beyond the standards, we may need quality infrastructure totally, which is important because I think this is a context, a framework which need to work. And I will very quickly go to the last panelist because we need to wrap up also finish very quickly. And Juan Pablo, I'm so sorry. It was not my intention, obviously, but we are so talkative here and it's important. I know that Unido launched the Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index 2 weeks ago. And can you share the Unido experience on quality infrastructure for sustainable development and concretely illustrate us how this index measures standards for sustainability? Sorry for pressurizing you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Raymond. I know that we're on a tight schedule. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Yes, indeed, Unido launched the Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development Index about a week and a half ago. And this was an initiative. And yes, this is a lab. This is an experiment that we did, taking the experience that we have at Unido and other experiences around the world. And we got together with key institutions in quality infrastructure, international institutions. I'm talking about ISO, IEC, BIPM, OML, ILAC, IIF, these key institutions that bring together all the quality infrastructure, national quality infrastructure institutions. It was very important to mention what was said last. Standards is as a pillar of quality infrastructure. It is interdependent. Standards by itself without the quality infrastructure will not have much value. Quality infrastructure without standards would not have much value. So it is very important to stress out the complementarities in the interdependence of the whole system, the whole quality infrastructure system. So the group of the experts, we got together and to say, how can we measure quality infrastructure for sustainable development? Because quality infrastructure, it's a very wide concept from different pillars, conformity assessment, even regulations, market access, not to mention the institutions that are responsible for those pillars on accreditation, on metrology. First, we needed to know, okay, what is sustainable development? And at the beginning was outlined by Raymond, the link to Agenda 2030, where there is an international community wanted to enable a dignified life without worldwide by 2030. And for that, we said, okay, what is a dignified life? It is preserving the environment, economic and social aspects. The different panelists mentioned a lot of economic, a lot of environment, not that much on social, preserving the social part. And if we remember the slide of the top 10 challenges, the top 5 challenges are about environment and social challenges. So it is very important to take that into account, these 3 areas of people, prosperity, and planet that was divided, of course, and then peace and partnership was divided in the Agenda 2030 in 17 goals. So that's the framework of sustainable development. Those 17 goals have like 10 targets, each of the goals. So it is that it's really framing onto that disaggregated level of 17 goals, 169 targets, and 231 indicators. So this is what we're measuring. And I completely agree that standards and quality infrastructure will allow us to measure the progress to sustainable development in this framework, in the areas of people, prosperity, and planet. So we got together to see how this can be measured. And we came up with a index. We have 36 indicators, data for 137 countries, where we look at the fit for purpose of their quality infrastructure in order to tackle the SDGs. A key element is the standards. Of course, what are the standards that address the people part, the prosperity part, and the planet? Some of the standards are very straightforward on environmental compliance, on one mention about the forest maintenance and forest, that is very clear that it is affecting the planet part. But other standards are not that clear. So together with the institutions, we in a way mapped, and they at their own, they have their mapping exercises, how this standard affects the people, the planet, or the prosperity, or in a more disaggregated way, which of the 17 SDGs is this affecting. So we got together and we presented it. As I mentioned, I can share the links on that, and looking at the goals, the targets, and the indicators. This was a key element to see, okay, for example, goal number 6, ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. The target, one of the targets is that by 2030, achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. So what are the standards that can influence that target? And what is the indicator that that target has? The indicator is the proportion of population using safety management drinking water. So what are the standards that we have faced? So food safety standards, standards for analysis of water, standards for conformity assessment that they're using the laboratories. So all these standards are contributing to achieve that particular indicator of that target, of that goal, to improve the livelihood of people. This is just an example, and there are many examples. If we look at the different 200 and something indicators, we can relate standards to sustainable development in this framework. Now, their technology, another question that I would pose is how technology standards support sustainable development. This is a different question and more targeted to what brings us here in Vienna. Technology standards or innovation standards, how innovation standards support sustainable development. And I leave with that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Personally, I'm very impressed and interested by this index, and you know it very well. So obviously we are now concluding because I need in 2 minutes to give the floor back to the organizers. But before that, allow me to thank obviously Kuku, Lena, Juan Pablo, and the two experts here, Cindy and Anna, for their brilliant presentation, and also for being patient with me, for pressurizing them. It was very interesting. I will leave the floor to Cindy to conclude, but because it's the best way also to go out of this session. But before, allow me, I definitely trust that this new slogan of Unido saying, obviously, prosperity, or how we call it also again in the Unido. So we call it progress by innovation. Today, we are doing an extension of that, saying, obviously, it is important to standards. Through standards, we get sustainability. I think those two things should not be broken. They are two pieces, two parts of the same cake. So I thank you for your attention, for your patience, but I give the floor for the conclusion to Cindy. Thank you for being here, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Raymond, and thank you to all the panelists. It was absolutely fantastic to hear what you've got to say. So much value, but I think the main takeaway that we all agree is that standards and quality infrastructure are absolutely critical to build trust, which is fundamental in achieving net zero sustainable growth. And we need to make sure that an active standards policy is reflected, that we partner together to make standards-led growth a reality through that. So thank you so much. Thank you.
So we have arrived to the end of these two special sessions. Colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are extremely honored to have had with us today distinguished speakers, both from present here at Unido headquarters, but also connected online. I would like to thank all of you for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and insights on various perspectives, particularly on the field of innovation, digital transformation, and standards for sustainable development. Along this week, we have gladly hosted the working sessions of the ISO TC 279, Working Group 1 and Working Group 3, which has progressed on the work of innovation standard series. Still tomorrow, I understand you have more work to do. It's not yet finished. In this framework, we hosted on Monday a first special session in which we launched the Handbook of Innovation Management. By the way, if anyone wants more copies, I have a box there. As well as online course on managing innovation that we had in our knowledge hub. All these tools together with ISO. Within this session, we discussed on the relevance of partnerships to boost innovation, as well as how to mainstreaming ISO 56000 series in some African countries particularly. Today, we host the second session during which the experts on innovation and standard accompanying us in discussing new approaches and initiatives to promote digital transformation, as well as standards to accelerate inclusive and sustainable industrial development, and of course, the Agenda 2030. So I would like to thank you again, all the speakers. This session and more widely, the whole working week that we have been having, full of working sessions, represents a very unique effort between Unido and ISO collaboration. Therefore, I would like to invite now the representative of both organizations to deliver some concluding remarks. I am glad to give the floor now to our colleague, Mr. Leopoldo Colombo, convener of the ISO TC 279 Working Group 1, for some closing statement. Leopoldo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alejandro. As you have said, we are coming to an end of these seminars and also almost coming to an end of our meeting here in Vienna. But not coming to an end of the collaboration between Unido and TC279. By contrary, I think just one step more in this reinforcing collaboration between both organizations. Collaboration that we started with Bernardo 6 years ago, more or less, I think, with a common friend of us, Nigel Groff, that told us, hey guys, why you don't meet because you may have something in common. So he invited me here to Unido with a good coffee, I would say. And after that meeting, we decided to start some kind of collaboration between Unido and TC279, and the results have been seen during this week. The handbook is one of them. The important association of Unido as a liaison of TC279, and of course this meeting that has been quite a challenge to be organized. After 3 years of pandemic, the last time we see each other, our faces, was in Sweden in May 2019. Just 3 years to have the opportunity to shake hands again. And now in June, we are all working without masks and meeting in the same room without mask. But when we started with Alejandro to discuss this, it was February. Not even the cherries were blossoming in Tokyo, as Hiro said, and we started to plan this meeting and taking some risk, because also not only for the pandemic, because ISO regulations says that we have to organize a hybrid meeting, a concept that is nice to say in an office, but then you have to deploy that really, on the floor. And one issue is to have a hybrid meeting for 3 hours, and another issue is a hybrid meeting for 4 days in a row from 9 to 5, with people waking up, as our friend Joanna, at 4 a.m. in the morning, and some people on the East still late in the night to participate. So I would like to congratulate all the working group 1 for the hard work done. I would like to thank Peter for the coordination, Joanna, our available writer, and also all those who have been following us through the virtual media. Because if it is hard for us to be 8 hours in the room, imagine being 8 hours just facing a screen. Is even more boring, I would say. But we have had interesting participants with the virtual participation. And also thank you for Unido to give us the technology to make that possible. Because as I said, these issues are easy to say when you're planning, but then you have to deploy that you need technology, resources, and determination. So thank you, Unido, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, Sibila, because you have been just taking care of all our details, giving us all the resources we need. And again, taking all the experts of this working group one that with the years has developed quite a big muscle to take challenges abroad. Valerie from Standard Austria said that he was surprised when 1 year ago he listened about standards and innovation. So imagine us 9 years ago talking about standards and innovations. You say, who are these guys? What are they trying to make? And it took 5 years for us, more than 2,500 comments to publish our first draft, a guidance. And we said, this is it? No, this is not it. We are going for more. Peter invited 3 years ago or more in London, Joanna, myself, to a nice dinner, and we started to discuss a requirement standard. And then other volunteers joined the group, and we developed a proposal. We knocked the door of ISO and said, no, okay, what is missing? This and this and this. We did it, we knocked again. No, still some details are missing. Okay, we knock again, and now we got the green line, and here we are. So here we are under a tough schedule, but once again, working group one has the muscle to accomplish this task. And this week, you guys have demonstrated that you can do it. So congratulations to you, and thanks again, Alejandro, Sibila, Bernardo, who are always in the back there, but always present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leopoldo, for these nice words. I would like now to give the floor to Ms. Irene Macar, convener of the ISO TC 279, Working Group 3, for some closing statements. Irene, the floor is yours.
First, I'd like to say I'm really honored to speak on behalf of the entire Work Group 3. Like Work Group 1, we're a very impressive group. We're innovators, and a real pleasure to work with everyone. I'd like to acknowledge great thanks to Unido for hosting this function. There's a big team behind organizing a conference like this. And of course, Alexandro and Sibylla were our prime contacts. And I have to admit, as Leo mentioned, I was really worried about these virtual meetings because we have not had a virtual meeting like this before. The technology in the room is first class. It was seamless. It was fantastic. And it was the people that connected in and the ones in the room both felt like one group. So thank you very, very much for that. Also, Work Group 3 develops tools and methods to complement the innovation management system. Currently, we're focusing on the guidance standard, and once the requirement standard gets published, we will be focusing on that. We develop standards to assist the use of an innovation management system. We develop standards to increase or to assist the implementation of the IMS. And we also, in some cases, focus on one subject matter in the innovation management system and expand on that. And so that helps the effectiveness and the efficiency of the implementation of the IMS. Work Group 3 has developed, we're in the development of our 5th standard. We've published 3 standards and we have 2 in the pipeline. A lot of the topics that you talked about collaboration, you talked about supply chain partnerships. We've developed standards in some of those, and one of the first standard that we developed is in partnership. So if you're thinking of collaboration, this is a perfect generic standard to pick up. It starts with a gap analysis. What do you want to solve? Then it goes into the process of how you select partnerships. There's tools to select partnerships. How do you harmonize? So you're speaking the same language. And at the end, we end with some contractual contracts that you can actually engage in. We've developed a standard on intellectual property. And certainly in the, I've done a little bit of research in the development world, only 10% of women actually file patents. And this standard focuses on what kind of processes do you need within your organization to be aware of IPRs, intellectual property rights, at every stage of the development process. We've developed a standard on strategic intelligence. And so that's developed what type of it's like a circular system within your organization. We're currently working on a standard on ideas and opportunity generation, and we're managing ideas and opportunities. And we met in Vienna to work on the measurement standard. We were taking up comments in the standard. The measurement standard is focuses on what is the need. It's basically working with organizations. It's emphasizing the need for measurements, how to implement the measurements, and how to evaluate your organization to ensure these measurements are actually working. So I'll end with that. I have project leads that I work with. Work group 3 is unique, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this right at the beginning, because every standard that we develop in work group 3 is very technical specific. So for example, the measurement standard is the project lead is Dr. Soren Cohen, and he is the measurement expert. And so we have in IPR, we had 2 lawyers that were leading the actual project. So I'm the convener with many standards under us that we're developing, but each one is headed up by either 1 or 2 project leads. So again, thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the work group 3 experts. We definitely bring in many, many angles. There was some talk about harmonization. We have 192 experts in our group, covers about 46 countries. So when we actually design a standard, there's many, many countries, the input of many countries from both developed and the developing world. So again, thank you very much. And I guess that ends today.
Thank you, Irene. This is it's very good to know us all these figures and the work that you have been doing so far. I would like now, I am very honored to give the floor to our colleague, Ms. Natasha Weiser, Senior Coordination Officer and Officer in Charge at the ODG, at the Office of the Director General in Unido. I will give you the floor now.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's now my task and my pleasure to thank you for your participation in and for your contribution to this Unido ISO Innovation Lab session, which focused on digital transformation, innovation ecosystems, and standards for sustainable development. It was actually really nice to come into this room because it was such an open atmosphere, open collaborative spirit. And I just thought that when I was listening to you in the last session, that this is actually a big part of the trust building as well, to be able to come together and have these kind of exchanges and to build something together. I cannot talk so much about the details and the technical intricacies of what you discussed over the past couple of days, but I just wanted to reflect on a few broader issues and then send you off into the nice, hopefully nice evening in Vienna. So one aspect, of course, that is critical is innovation. It's critical and we need it more now than we ever needed it before because there are so many challenges that we are facing and we need innovative solutions to address them, whether it's the COVID pandemic, persistent hunger, climate change, or environmental degradation. We also needed to deal with the consequences of these phenomena. And I'm sure you know much more about the specific details, whether it's to boost productivity in agriculture, deploy renewable energy technologies, optimize our use of resources, to decarbonize our industries, and many more aspects that I think were just mentioned. To achieve this, the power of SMEs, their importance or their relative importance and their contribution as such should not be underestimated. They are central to inclusive and sustainable industrial development. As they are more productive, they create more high quality jobs, and they are a critical element in realizing competitive and resilient global value chains. Of course, there's also the element of digital transformation. This is accelerating, and it has really important implications for people, for the economy, and our entire planet. But digital technologies, or digitalization as such, is just the means to an end. And what the actual end is something that we need to determine. Digital technologies have led to tremendous amounts of innovation for society, for the economy, but they can also have negative impacts, for instance, by exposing sensitive information or changing the nature of competition. They can be environmentally harmful or be deployed to improve the situation, for instance, by improving resource consumption. So this is where the standards come in. We need to implement standards that govern digital transformation to make sure that we can maximize the benefits and minimize the drawbacks, and then to be somewhat in control of the ends these kinds of technologies should serve. As you all know much better than I do, Unido is a strong advocate for the use of standards to enhance prosperity and the well-being of people, but also, of course, to safeguard our environment and the planet. We work on many different aspects, standards development, such as the ones discussed this week, standards promotion and advocacy, and SMEs and how we can harness the benefits of digitalization for them and make innovation, which is really the holy grail of entrepreneurial success, more tangible for these kinds of partners or stakeholders, is really a key focus of Unido's work. And in that, I think ISO is our natural ally and very important partner. Alejandro mentioned the kinds of outputs that were presented during this week, the Handbook on Innovation Management Systems, which was launched just on Monday during the innovation seminar. And of course, an online training course on innovation management, which is now available on the Unido Knowledge Hub in both English and Spanish, which can help us take some of these aspects forward. And since I'm here also on behalf of Unido, on behalf of ODG, our new Director General, Gerd Müller, has explained it many times that Unido will, even more than before, be a platform for knowledge and technology transfer, a platform to mobilize innovations and investments. And to achieve this, we really need standards. We need a systemic and a systematic approach to sustainable industrial and economic development that is centered on SMEs. We need to focus on resilient and standard compliant supply chains to spread the benefits, but also to create or to build on this trust that I think we all think is really the basis for for sort of joining forces on sustainable development. And we need to focus on green and digital skills of the future. From the work that you have done this week, I think it just reinforces that we can build on this together with ISO. And it's a nice opportunity for me to thank everybody present here or participating virtually, particularly the representatives of ministries, standards institutions, the many experts in the field of innovation standards, and my Unido colleagues, the ISO colleagues who made this week possible. We really look forward to joining forces with you. And now I thank you for your time and contributions and wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. We are very honored to have this message from the Office of the Director General. I just want to reiterate that Unido believe innovation and standards are really the way to accelerate the path toward achieving the industrial inclusive sustainable industrial development. But also we value very much the partnership with the ISO. Yeah. In this regard, we are very happy, we are very honored to be part of this family. Once again, I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers and moderators for sharing their expertise with us through these two laboratories and the seminar on Monday. A big thanks particularly to the ministerial and other countries' representatives that has been also participating, to the ISO colleagues, Leopoldo, Irene. Without you, I don't think we've been able to organize these two sessions, but also I thank you a lot for the cooperation on this week and previously for the coordination. Also to the colleagues from ISO, from the technical committee. Laura, Monica is not here with us, but also for supporting us. Of course, to our team, Davila, and also Suki, that is still in China, but is cooperating with us remotely. And of course, to our colleagues in the Department of Digitalization, Technology, Innovation for supporting us, and the other colleagues of Unido. Thanks also to the participants who attended remotely this session. For this one, we have 94. Yeah. On Monday, we have 96 connected participants, which is a good number. And we hope you enjoy it. And we invite you to monitor all our Unido future activities in this regard on innovation management standards together with ISO, but also innovation in general. As has been said several times already, our Director General has identified our main logo, our main slogan, progress by innovation. So this will be at the very core of our actions in the future. Thank you very much.